The wind was sharp and cold, cutting through the ruins of the old alien village like invisible blades. Snow fell gently, but the night was cruel. Eli, a human aid worker, walked carefully through the broken path, his boots crunching on frozen dirt. He had come to this world weeks ago, hoping to help the survivors of a terrible war, but what he found was silence, shame, and eyes that always looked away. He carried a small pack filled with food and medical supplies. Most of the villagers didn't want his help. But he stayed anyway. Something about this place felt unfinished, like a wound that hadn't healed. That's when he saw her behind the broken wall of an old stone house. Curled in a corner was a figure. She was covered in rags, her skin a pale shade of blue, marked with strange glowing lines, her arms wrapped around two tiny children, both shaking. Both silent. They didn't cry, didn't speak. They just shivered together in the dark. Eli's breath caught in his throat. He looked around. Others saw her too, but no one moved. They walked past, pretending she didn't exist. Who is she? Eli asked a tall alien man nearby. The man looked away quickly and muttered, "Widow cursed. Best you leave her be." Eli's eyebrows pulled together. He stepped closer, ignoring the whispers behind him. She noticed him, eyes wide and glowing. In the dark, she didn't speak, just stared like a frightened animal. Eli knelt slowly, his voice soft. "Hey, you cold." Still no answer. Her children tightened their grip on her. They were skin and bones, and her arms trembled from weakness. Eli unzipped his jacket, pulled out the thick brown blanket he had been using to sleep in his own cold shelter without asking. He placed it over her and the children, tucking the corners gently around them. The alien woman flinched, then froze. She stared at him, not in fear now, but disbelief. No one should freeze. Eli said softly, "Not like this." He offered a small package of nutrient food and a bottle of water. Placing them beside her, still, she didn't move. Eli stood slowly and walked a few steps back. He didn't want to scare her, he just watched, making sure she took the food slowly. She reached out with one shaky hand. Her fingers brushed the edge of the blanket, then gripped it tight. She pulled it closer around her children and whispered something in a language he didn't understand, but it sounded like a thank you. Eli stayed for a while. Standing in the falling snow, the wind howled, but in that moment it felt quiet. He watched as the woman leaned back against the wall, her children finally closing their eyes. Her own eyes blinked slowly. Watching him, still unsure if he was real, one of the villagers hissed, "You'll bring her curse onto yourself." Eli turned and walked back to his shelter without answering. He didn't believe in curses, but he did believe in kindness. That night, he slept without a blanket. He wrapped his arms around himself and shivered. But in his heart, he felt warmth. Something about her face, her silence had stayed with him. The next morning, he returned to the same spot, but she was gone. The corner where she had sat was empty. Only his blanket remained folded neatly with something placed on top. It was a small, glowing stone shaped like a tear. An alien token. Eli picked it up and held it in his hand. It pulsed softly, like a heartbeat. He looked around, searching for her in the streets, but she had vanished, like a ghost swallowed by shame. And yet, something told him she would return. Maybe not tonight, but soon. She had taken his warmth. Yes, but left something behind too. Not just the stone, something deeper. A feeling he couldn't name. A silent connection in the cold night, and he wasn't going to let it disappear. Not again. The next morning, the sky was still gray. The cold wind had not softened. Eli woke with aching bones and stiff arms from sleeping without his blanket. He rubbed his eyes, still thinking about the woman and her children. Without wasting time, he walked back to the ruined house. But when he arrived, his steps stopped. She was gone. The space where she had sat where he had wrapped them in warmth was empty. His blanket, however, was there, folded with care, and on top of it, glowing softly, was the strange tear-shaped stone. Eli picked it up, turning it in his fingers. It felt warm, almost alive. He didn't understand alien customs well. But this felt like a sign, a gift, maybe, or a message. He looked around the village, scanning for her. The same villagers passed by again, eyes avoiding his. Eli stopped one older woman and asked, "The widow Kailari, where did she go?" The woman's face turned hard. "She doesn't belong here," she said coldly. "If you're wise, you'll forget her." Eli clenched his jaw. "I gave her my blanket," he said. "She didn't steal it." The woman shook her head and muttered, "She left it, didn't she? That means she's smart enough to know the line she crossed." And with that, she walked off. Eli looked back at the stone in his hand. "She tried to leave," he whispered silently, like she was never here, but he couldn't let it end like that. That night, instead of sleeping, he walked the edge of the ruined village. He checked alleys, broken shelters, even the fields where refugees sometimes hid from shame. His fingers numb, his breath fogging in front of him. And then, by a collapsed food storage building, he saw something, a flicker of movement like a shadow pulling away from light. He stepped closer. Slowly, there she was, Kailari, crouched behind crates, arms wrapped tightly around her two children. Their faces were dirty, their eyes wide and tired. Kailari's eyes met his. Startled, she stood up quickly, shielding her children, as if expecting punishment. "I didn't steal," she whispered in broken English. "I left blanket. See?" Eli raised both hands gently. "I know. I saw." He took a step closer. But she backed away, her body shaking. "I bring no curse to you," she said quickly, almost begging. "Please, don't follow me. I'm not here to blame you." Eli said, his voice soft and steady, "I'm here to help." Kailari looked unsure, her arms trembling. Her youngest child coughed a deep, painful sound. Eli slowly knelt, pulling out a fresh blanket, a sealed food pack, and water. He placed them on the ground in front of him and slid them forward. "Please," he said, "just take it. You don't have to run." She didn't move at first, but then, seeing her child's cough worsen, she dropped to her knees and pulled the supplies close. She opened the water bottle and let her daughter drink first. Then the older child, then finally herself. Eli watched in silence. She was so careful, so focused on giving her children everything first, even though her hands were shaking. Even though her lips were cracked from thirst, she didn't drink. Until they had, he spoke gently. "You don't need to hide anymore." Kailari looked at him, eyes filling with tears. "People say I carry death," she said softly. "My husband, he died in battle. They blame me." Eli frowned. "That's not your fault." Kailari hesitated, then whispered, "You are the only one who gave me warmth. No one else even looked at me." Eli took off his gloves and held out his bare hand. "My name is Eli," he said. "I'm not from here, but I care." She stared at his hand for a long time, so long that he thought she might not take it. But slowly, slowly, she reached out and touched his fingers. Her hand was cold, thin, but the grip was strong. "I'm Kailari," she said, "and these are my hearts." Eli smiled. "Nice to meet you, Kailari." He stood and motioned for her to follow him. "Come to my shelter." "Not much, but it's warmer than this." She hesitated again, then nodded, picking up her children carefully. As they walked back toward the small structure Eli had built, Kailari whispered, "Why do you help me? Your people don't owe mine anything." Eli looked ahead and replied, "I don't help because I owe." "Kailari, I help because it's right." That night, Kailari and her children lay wrapped in his extra blankets. Eli sat by the fire, quiet. Watching them rest, she didn't speak much, but before closing her eyes, she said just one thing. If I could dream again, I would dream of this night. And for the first time in a long while, she closed her eyes without fear. The fire crackled gently in the center of Eli's small shelter. Its orange light danced across the walls made of broken metal sheets and old wood. Kylar sat with her legs folded, her arms around her two children. They were asleep now, curled against her chest, their breathing slow and soft. Eli sat across from them, warming his hands over the flames. He had made the fire bigger tonight, stronger, because he wanted her to feel safe. No one had said a word for nearly an hour. Only the sound of fire and far-off wind filled the space. Kylari glanced at him from behind her silver hair. Her eyes shimmered in the firelight. But her face held a question she didn't speak out. Loud Eli finally broke the silence. When was the last time you were warm? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked down at her children and brushed the hair from their faces. Before the bombs, she said quietly. Before the fire fell from the sky, Eli nodded slowly, remembering the news reports. The war had destroyed cities, but not all wounds came from weapons. Some came from silence, rejection. Being left behind, they said I was cursed, Kylari added. My mate died defending the sacred vault, and I lived. Her voice cracked. To them, that meant I was touched by weakness. By shame, Eli frowned. You survived, he said. That's not weakness. Kylari's fingers trembled. They think I should have died with him. The fire popped, sending small sparks into the air. Kylari flinched. Her instincts? Still sharp from nights hiding in ruins. Eli noticed and leaned forward slightly. You're safe here, he said. No one's going to hurt you. She stared at the flames, her expression softening. Why do you help me, human? She asked finally. You are not from my world. Eli thought for a moment. Then shrugged. I saw someone cold, someone alone, someone with children to protect. That was enough. Kylari blinked slowly, as if she didn't believe him. I've seen kindness in your kind, she whispered. But never for someone like me. Eli reached into his pack and pulled out a second food ration. He gently handed it to her, and for a moment their fingers brushed. It was a small touch. But Kylari pulled back quickly, as if afraid she had done something wrong. Eli smiled softly. It's okay. She looked at him, almost studying his face, her voice lowered. My people. We don't speak to strangers like this. Not anymore, Eli understood. Trust was fragile, like thin glass, especially after war. After betrayal, so he didn't push, didn't demand her story. He just added more wood to the fire and kept sitting close enough for her to feel the warmth. One of her children stirred in sleep, mumbling in the alien tongue. Kylari gently stroked the girl's back, humming a soft tune under her breath. A lullaby, perhaps, from a time before the war. Eli listened, the melody unfamiliar but beautiful. It carried sadness, but also something gentle, something pure. Does she remember her father? Eli asked after a while. Kylari nodded, eyes moist. She was old enough to cry when they took his body away, she whispered. The little one was still in my belly then. Eli's heart tightened. He looked down at the small bundle of cloth near her side, the baby girl now breathing calmly. Wrapped in layers of old fabric, she had survived all this. Because her mother refused to give up? She's strong, Eli said. Like her mother, Kylari looked at him again. A strange look on her face. She seemed unsure whether to smile or cry. I try, she whispered, but some nights I close my eyes and wish I had vanished with him. Eli leaned forward, voice low but firm. Don't, he said. You're here for them, and now you're not alone. The fire between them glowed brighter. Not just the real fire, but something else, something invisible. Trust, for the first time. Kailari didn't pull her eyes away from his. She held his gaze and nodded slowly. Something inside her was shifting. When it came time to sleep, Kailari hesitated. Eli stood up and stepped. Outside, giving her privacy, later, she opened the door flap, her voice soft. "You may come in. It's..." Warmer now, Eli entered, surprised to find the children already asleep. Kailari sat beside them, her head lowered as he moved to a spot near the fire. She spoke again. "I used to hate the silence," she said. "But this silence feels different." Eli nodded. "Sometimes silence is healing." She pulled the blanket up over her shoulder and looked at him one last time before lying down. That night, as the fire burned low, Kailari didn't cry. She didn't tremble. And she didn't try to run, because for the first time in a long time, she was warm, not just on her skin, but somewhere deeper, somewhere the cold couldn't reach. Eli woke before the sun. The fire was nothing but glowing embers now. The shelter was cold again. But not silent. Kailari was already awake, holding her youngest and watching the sky through a hole in the roof. She didn't say anything when he sat up. She only nodded, then gently whispered something to her child and kissed her forehead. Eli stood, stretched his back, and quietly made tea from the herbs he'd gathered. As the steam rose, Kailari finally spoke. "I had a dream last night," she said softly. "A memory." Eli listened quietly, letting her speak in her own time. "I saw my mate again," she continued. "He was smiling, standing in front of the sacred vault. Reaching for me," her voice cracked. "But I couldn't walk toward him. Something held me back." Eli handed her the warm tea, his hand brushing hers again. "Maybe it wasn't time yet," he said. "Maybe your path isn't with him anymore." Kailari looked down at the cup, then slowly sipped. Oh. She seemed calmer than before, but something still sat heavy in her eyes. That morning, Eli left the shelter to find more supplies. Kailari stayed behind, rocking her child gently and humming the same song from the night before. The villagers watched Eli as he passed, some with judgment, others with silent curiosity, when he returned later. A tall alien stood waiting outside his shelter. It was one of the village elders, robes dark, his expression unreadable. "You?" the elder said coldly. "You stay too close to that widow." Eli didn't answer right away. He placed the supplies down and looked the elder in the eye. "She's a person," he said calmly. "Not a curse. She carries shame." The elder replied, "Her husband was chosen by the vault, but she lived instead." "That's not shame," Eli said. "That's survival." The elder's lips thinned. "Your kindness will only bring you pain," he warned. "Mark my words, human," without another word. The elder walked off, his robe brushing through the dust. Eli stood still, hands clenched, the fire inside him rising. He entered the shelter and found Kailari feeding the children. Her face turned pale when she saw the expression on his. "They came to warn you, didn't they?" she asked. Eli nodded slowly. "They think helping you is dangerous." He said, "That you bring misfortune." Kailari lowered her gaze. "They always thought that." She whispered, "Even before the war, some believed I didn't deserve him because of your caste." Eli asked gently. Kailari nodded. "I was born a servant. He was born a warrior. We weren't supposed to bond." Eli sat beside her, the anger in his chest slowly turning into understanding. "So you've been fighting all your life?" he said softly. Kailari looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. "Yes," she whispered, "but I'm tired now." Eli reached out and gently touched her hand. "You don't have to fight here," he said. "Not anymore." That evening, Eli did something unexpected. He walked into the center of the village and stood near the old fountain where the council Often gathered, some villagers looked up, surprised to see him. He raised his voice so they could all hear. "I came to this world to help," he said. "But now I see that help isn't just food and water, it's truth." He pointed toward the small shelter in the distance. "That woman," he said, "Kailari lost everything in the war, but she's still standing, still caring for her children, still hoping she is not a curse," Eli said loudly. "She is proof of strength," the crowd murmured, unsure how to react. Some turned away. Others whispered to each other. One older woman stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "She nursed my son once. Long ago? When I was sick," she said. The whisper turned into a quiet wave of memory. Others began to remember her too, not as a widow, not as a shame, but as a woman who once helped them all. Back at the shelter, Kailari had heard it all. She stood, frozen just outside, holding her youngest in her arms. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But she didn't wipe them away. When Eli returned, she stared at him in silence. "Why did you do that?" she whispered. He shrugged. "Because it's the truth." Kailari stepped forward slowly and placed her hand over his chest. "Your heart. It's loud," she said. "Louder than the fear in mine," for the first time. She smiled a real, fragile smile, and Eli knew something had changed. Not just in her, not just in the village, but in both of them. Peace was beginning to grow, like a small flame refusing to die. The sky had turned black with storm clouds. Winds blew harder than before, howling like wild animals across the hills. Dust danced in the air, mixing with snow. The planet's seasons were changing too fast, just like everything else in Kailar's life. Eli tightened the walls of the shelter, using ropes and old metal to block the wind. He looked outside, his face tense. He knew what this kind of storm could do. He'd seen it destroy whole villages when he first arrived. Inside, Kailari sat in silence, wrapping both children in blankets. They were frightened, holding each other and clinging to her sides. She was shaking, not from fear, but from cold. Her body had grown weaker over the past weeks, her voice softer, her limbs thinner. Though she smiled more lately, it was a tired smile. Eli entered, pushing the last panel of wood into place and dropping beside her. "They said the storm will last all night," he said, brushing ice from his jacket. Kailari looked up, her lips slightly blue. Her fingers trembled as she held the youngest eye. "I don't think I can keep them warm enough," she whispered. Eli looked around, then back at her. He made a quick decision, one that felt natural. He pulled off his thick coat and stepped closer. "Here," he said softly. "Lean against me." Kailari blinked, confused. "What?" "Body heat," Eli replied. "It's the fastest way." She hesitated, her eyes unsure. But then she looked at her daughters, both beginning to whimper from the chill. She nodded slowly. Eli sat with his back against the wall and gently motioned for her to come close. Kailari shifted carefully, her movements slow and careful. She leaned against his chest, bringing the children with her. Eli wrapped the thick coat around all four of them and held her close. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the sound of wind and Eli's steady breathing filled the air. Kailari closed her eyes, her head rested against his shoulder. She whispered, "You're warm." Eli smiled softly. "So are you now." Her hands trembled less as the warmth spread. The children stopped shaking, their small bodies relaxing. Under the blanket, time passed slowly. Eli could feel her breathing change slower, steadier. "I used to sleep like this," she whispered suddenly, "with him." When the nights were quiet, Eli nodded but said nothing. Kailari continued, her voice soft like snow falling, "But even then, he never held me this close." Her words surprised him, but he didn't move, didn't let go. She looked up at him, eyes filled with something he couldn't name. "Do you think I'm shameful?" she asked, her voice nearly breaking, "for still being alive, for being held by another." Eli shook his head slowly. "No," he said. "I think you're strong for surviving, for protecting your daughters, for still being able to feel." Warmth, a tear rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall. Let it be real. Eli gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I don't know your customs," he said, "but where I'm from, we don't punish." Survivor's Kailari gave a quiet, shaky laugh. "I wish I was from your world." Eli smiled. "Maybe now." "This shelter is part of it." The storm outside roared louder. But inside, it was quiet safe. Kailari shifted, resting her head fully on his chest now, her arms wrapped gently around her children. But also around his waist, the children mumbled. In their sleep, pressing deeper into the warmth. Their bodies trusting, peaceful. Eli looked down at the woman, now leaning into him. Her silver hair shimmered in the firelight, her face soft in sleep. She was beautiful, not just in shape, but in soul. She had been crushed, rejected, forgotten. And yet here she was, still holding on, still protecting what she loved. The night passed slowly. Eli never moved, never let go, even when his back ached and his legs went numb. He stayed like that, arms around her, around them all, because for the first time in his life, he wasn't just helping someone. He was needed, and deep inside, something told him he needed them too. The storm ended by morning. Snow still fell, but the winds had quieted. The village was covered in a white sheet, soft, still, peaceful. Inside the shelter, the fire had burned low, but warmth still lingered. Eli opened his eyes to find Kailari still leaning against him. Her children were nestled close, their small hands gripping parts of his shirt. He didn't move. Something about this stillness felt sacred. Kailari stirred slowly, blinking awake, her gaze lifted to meet his, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. "Didn't mean to fall asleep on you," she whispered. "I didn't mind," Eli replied, voice low. "You were warm." Kailari smiled shyly, a soft blush rising to her cheeks, but then she looked away, her smile fading. "You'll be leaving soon, won't you?" Her voice tight. "Your ship must be calling you back." Eli sat up straighter, gently adjusting the blanket over the children. "I don't know," he said honestly. "They want me back, but I haven't decided." Kailari said nothing. She only nodded, like she had already accepted the answer long ago. Later that day, news arrived. More human workers were landing in nearby villages, bringing more aid and supplies. Eli's name was on a list transport scheduled for the end of the week. When Kailari overheard this, she grew quiet. She didn't cry, didn't ask questions. She just folded blankets, made food, and spoke little that night. Eli moved his bedroll to the side of the shelter to give her more space. But when the fire dimmed and silence filled the room, something unexpected happened. Kailari rose from her place, stepped quietly to his side, and knelt beside him without saying a word. She laid down gently next to him. Eli froze, surprised. She pulled part of the blanket over them both and curled close. "I can't sleep," she whispered. "Not alone anymore." Her voice was soft but firm. "I tried while you were out. But the cold came back, not just in my body, but in my heart." Eli turned to look at her. Her face was inches from his, her eyes wide and vulnerable. "I didn't plan to feel this," she said. "I didn't plan to need you. I know." Eli whispered back, "Neither did I." She reached for his hand under the blanket. Their fingers touched, warm, uncertain, but real. "I'm not asking you to stay," Kailari said quietly. "But if you do, I'll never ask you to leave." Her words hit deeper than anything he'd heard since the war. Eli turned to face her fully. "No one's ever said that to me," he said. Kailari blinked, confused. "You're strong, you're kind. How is that possible?" Eli gave a sad smile. "Kindness isn't always returned." Even on Earth, Kailari moved closer, her forehead gently resting against his. "Then let it be returned now," she whispered. They lay like that through the night. No kisses, no promises, just silence, closeness, and shared breath. When morning came, Kailari didn't rise early like before. She stayed under the blanket with him, her children still asleep nearby. She looked at Eli and asked one quiet question. "Would you want to stay, even if it's hard?" Eli thought about it, his job, his mission, his life on Earth, and then he looked around. A quiet shelter. 2 small children who now trusted him, and a woman who once had nothing but now gave everything with just her. "Presents, yes," he said. "I would later." The council sent word. Eli's transport had arrived, waiting for final confirmation. Kailari stood beside him as he stared at the message. "You don't have to choose yet," she said, though her voice trembled. Eli turned to her and said, "I already did." She stared, unsure if she heard right. Eli stepped closer, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "If I leave," he said, "I leave a piece of myself here. But if I stay, I feel whole." Kailari lowered her head. "You're strange, human," she whispered, "but your heart. It feels like home." And when night came again, she didn't wait. She walked to his bedroll, pulled him gently down, and curled beside him. She refused to sleep without him, not because of weakness, but because she had found something rare in a ruined world, a man who gave warmth without expecting reward. A heart that stayed even when he had every reason to go. And for Kailari, that was more sacred than any bond her people had ever written. The morning light touched the shelter softly. It crept across the floor like a warm hand, chasing away the last breath of cold. Kailari opened her eyes slowly, her cheek resting against Eli's chest. She didn't move, didn't speak. She only listened to his heartbeat, slow and calm. It was a sound she never thought she'd hear again. Not after the war, not after loss. Beside them, her daughters still slept, tangled in warm blankets, their tiny hands now reaching toward Eli in their sleep. They didn't cry anymore. They didn't wake in fear. They had found something they never had before. Safety, home. Eli stirred beneath her, his eyes opening with a small sigh. She looked up. Their eyes meeting in quiet peace. "Still here?" She asked softly. "Still here?" He whispered back with a smile. No promises had been spoken aloud, no vows, no grand words, but in that moment, both of them knew he wasn't leaving. Later that day, Eli made his way to the village's small communication tower. There, he sent a message to the humans waiting for him. "I won't be returning. I found something that matters more." No explanation, no request, just the truth. The village council received word. And though some grumbled, none dared confront him again. Word had spread how the human had stood in the storm for her, how the cursed widow now smiled and walked with strength, how her children laughed again. Some called it strange, others called it wrong, but a few, a quiet few, started calling it beautiful. Days passed, then weeks. Eli and Kailari worked side by side. They repaired broken shelters, planted food together, taught the children how to fish. Every evening, the 4 of them would sit by the fire. Kailari would hum lullabies. Eli would tell stories from Earth, and her daughters would fall asleep in his arms as if they had always belonged there. One night, Kailari handed him a small object. It was the tear-shaped stone she had left on his folded blanket long ago. "You kept it?" he asked, surprised. Kailari nodded. "I thought it was just a thank you gift," he said. Turning it in his hand, she shook her head gently. "It's more than that," she whispered. "In my culture, when someone gives you warmth in your darkest hour, we offer this stone as a sign of trust, sometimes even love." Eli looked at her carefully. Her cheeks were red, her eyes lowered. But her hands didn't tremble this time. Do you love me, Kailari? He asked softly. Honestly, she lifted her head. I don't know the human word for what I feel, she whispered. But every time you walk away, my heart follows, and when you hold me, the cold leaves my soul. Eli took her hand. You don't have to say anything else. He said, I understand. And in that quiet space, they leaned into each other, not as savior and survivor, not as human and alien, but as something far more powerful, a family. Seasons changed. The war's memory faded like a bad dream. But the story of the human and the widow remained. Children in the village would point at Eli and say, that's the one who stayed. Others would whisper about Kailari, saying, she rose from nothing. And now, look, she walks with light again. But to them, none of that mattered. They didn't live for the village's words. They lived for small things, holding hands while watching the sunset, hearing the girls laugh, sharing stories over tea. One evening, Kailari sat beside Eli on the roof of their rebuilt home. She leaned her head on his shoulder and said, I used to think home was a place, and now? He asked, brushing her hair behind her ear. She smiled. Now I know. My home is a person. She turned to him, her eyes glowing softly in the starlight. My home is you. Eli didn't answer with words. He only pulled her closer, kissed the top of her head, and together they watched the stars, no longer alone, no longer broken, because in a world once filled with war and cold, they had